The family said the house gave them a choice: leave or die. This is the most famous haunted house in America. But before the haunting, there was a slaughter. On November 13th, 1974, one night, one house, one family was murdered in their beds as they slept. The killer, the family's own son, who claimed demonic voices made him do it. 13 months later, the Lutz family, George, Kathy, and her 3 kids, move in. A family buys their dream home, fully aware of the murders that happened inside. What they weren't prepared for was how quickly the house would turn on them and why they would abandon everything after just 28 days.
I knew right at that point what we were dealing with, and I said to myself, I don't think I'll ever come back in this house again.
This became the most viral paranormal story of all time, spawning dozens of books and movies. Their claims ignited a media firestorm that has never fully gone out. And nearly 50 years later, the story of what happened inside that house is still being argued, dissected, and monetized. Hey, my fellow spooky lovers, and welcome back to Paranormal Files. I'm your host, Nicki Nightmare. The last time we were together, we walked through the absolute nightmare that fell on the DeFeo family. Tonight, we're picking up right where we left off because the blood was barely dry when just 13 months later, another family looked at 112 Ocean Avenue, a house fresh off a family-sized murder, and thought, yep, that's the one. I mean, sure, the previous tenants were all brutally murdered, but look at the curb appeal. When the Lutz family left the house, they didn't just pack up and leave. They literally ran for their lives, abandoning everything. It's like they hit the factory reset on their entire life. This is the story of what happened after the Amityville murders, a story that became one of the most viral paranormal tales of all time. What happened inside that house didn't just traumatize one family. It created a story that would spiral out of control. As we've covered in our last deep dive, the DeFeo family had called their home High Hopes, but that dream was annihilated on November 13th, 1974. Let's just say the haunting didn't start with the Lutz family. The family's oldest son, 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., took a rifle and systematically murdered his entire sleeping family, his parents and his 4 younger siblings. If you want to know more about the DeFeos, you can watch the video linked above. With that much tragedy soaked into the walls, the house sat empty for more than a year, just waiting for its next family. And it was about to get one. Our new cast of characters, George Lutz, was a former Marine and a land surveyor who owned his own business. In 1975, he married Kathleen Connors, a mother of 3 kids from a previous marriage, Danny, Christopher, and Missy. In the summer of 1975, their search for a new home led them to the affluent town of Amityville and a beautiful 3-story Dutch colonial. The family toured the home and fell in love. I mean, who wouldn't? It had 5 bedrooms, a sunroom, a pool, a basement, and even a boathouse. It was only at the end of the tour that the realtor broke the news. Just over a year earlier, 6 people had been brutally murdered inside. For only $80,000, the someone was brutally murdered here discount, they got this massive waterfront home. They knew what had happened there, but they were optimistic. Plus, the price was right, and having a boathouse would have saved them a ton of money. The family discussed the horrid history and decided the deal was too good to pass up. According to friends, though, signs of the murders still lingered. There were still bullet holes and blood traces in the home. And get this, the furniture, including the very bed frames that the DeFeo family were murdered on, were still there. It's one thing to get a deal. It's another to sleep on furniture that's still basically part of a crime scene. Here's a little detail that feels, I don't know, important. George, the new dad, was apparently super into the occult and witchcraft. His son Daniel later testified that George had hundreds of books on demon worship and might have even been telekinetic. This is like a pyromaniac deciding to work at a firework factory because it's a good investment. Still, they sensibly asked a priest to bless the house. And on December 18, 1975, the day that they moved in, Father Ralph Pecoraro arrived while the family was unpacking. The priest went to work, and the blessing went smoothly until he entered the upstairs bedroom, the one where the DeFeo boys, Mark and John, were killed. The priest testified that he sprinkled holy water, sprinkle, 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 and a demonic voice growled, "Get out!" And an unseen force slapped him across the face. He noped right on out of there and later claimed that he developed severe blisters on his hands and that his calls to warn the family wouldn't go through.
Listen to what I'm telling you.
Father? Father!
For the family still unpacking their lives inside, the horror was just getting started. What the Lutzes described over the next 4 weeks is a bingo card of every horror movie trope ever. It started small, a cold so intense that the furnace, no matter how many times it was serviced, couldn't heat the house, with cold spots 20 to 30 degrees lower than the rest of the room. Then it got weirder. Swarms of flies would just appear in the sewing room, even though it was in the middle of the winter. Okay, nasty. Then came the goo. A strange greenish black slime started oozing out of the walls and even dripping from the keyholes. The house itself seemed to be turning on them. Doors were reportedly torn off their hinges, windows slammed shut, and a crucifix was found spun completely upside down. A Chinese lion statue would apparently move on its own, injuring George multiple times. And it wasn't just the house acting up. It was George. He became moody, angry, and apparently he just stopped bathing. Now, I don't know if that was a demon or just a personal choice, but either way, it's its own kind of horror story. Pretty nasty. He also began waking up every single morning at exactly 3:15 a.m. That's the estimated time of the DeFeo murders. Some people call 3 a.m. the devil's hour, when the veil between worlds is thinnest and demonic activity is at its peak. That's like a demonic alarm clock you can't hit snooze on. The attacks got personal. Kathy said she was touched by invisible hands, which became more violent. One day, she was even grabbed and held down in her bed. The family dog Harry nearly died after being found hanging by his leash from a fence as if he'd been terrified by something, and he was trying to flee. Danny and Christopher saw a shadow figure lurking around the house, which once left a visible impression in a chair. And in one incident, a window in the sewing room slammed down on Danny's hand so hard that it caused him to bleed. A chilling nod to the past, the whole family who normally slept on their sides started sleeping on their stomachs. That's the same position the DeFeo families were found, but the most terrifying presence wasn't targeting the adults. Christopher and Danny both reported seeing a demonic pig-like creature with glowing red eyes and fangs through their little sister Missy's bedroom window. Missy called her imaginary friend Jody. Sometimes Jody would appear as a little boy, but when he was angry, he'd appear as a pig. That's not an imaginary friend, sweetie. That's a one-way ticket to therapy.
Holy shit.
And the true violent nature of the house was about to be unleashed. The family tried to bless the home themselves, but a chorus of voices demanded that they stop. Things escalated. Danny described being thrown up. Yes, that's right, thrown up a flight of stairs by an unseen force, feeling like he was possessed with no control over his body. Christopher recalled hiding in a dark closet during a family game, only for Danny to lock him in, where he felt something unseen grab his legs. On their 28th night, they hit their breaking point. They've always been cagey about the details, saying it was too frightening to describe, but George later described beds levitating and banging on the floors, voices shouting and slamming doors. He said he was pinned to his bed, unable to help, as he helplessly watched Kathy levitate and her face transform into that of a horrifying 100-year-old hag with sagging skin and scratch marks all over her body. After a night of pure terror, the family had had enough. The next day, January 14th, 1976, they just bolted. They did not pack a bag. They left the furniture. They left the clothes. They left everything. This is the most extreme version of I gotta get out of this lease that I've ever heard. You'd think the horror would end there. You'd be wrong. The family fled to Kathy's mother's house, but the phenomena followed that. George felt an urge to return to the house. And Kathy? Well, she reportedly levitated and transformed again. I guess the demon had their forwarding address. How rude. But escaping the house was one thing. Escaping the story was another. And the world was about to hear the tale. To really get what supposedly went down with the Lutzes, you have to rewind the clock, like way, way back. Because apparently this house was built on some seriously bad juju. The most popular legend claims that the house sits on a former enclosure that was used by the Shinnecock Indian Nation to abandon their sick and mentally ill. Now, this is completely untrue because tribal representatives were like, no, that wasn't us. We were over here being expert whalers. Thanks. In reality, the Shinnecock people have lived on Long Island for thousands of years, miles away from Amityville. And if that isn't a dark enough foundation, there's a story of a man named John Ketchum. The legend says that Ketchum was an outcast from the Salem witch trials who fled to this exact plot of land to practice devil worship. Spooky, right? Except, no. The real John Ketchum did exist, but he wasn't a witch on the run. He was a prominent citizen. So less satanic rituals, more like attending town hall meetings. Historians and local indigenous groups have found zero evidence for any of these dark legends. So basically, all the ancient creepy legends, totally fan fiction. But don't worry, the house didn't need any help from ancient curses to get its horror resume started. After fleeing the house, the Lutz family didn't retreat into silence. They invited the paranormal world in. Demonologist Ed Warren and medium Lorraine Warren were amongst the first to investigate, attempting to document and cleanse what they believed was a demonic presence. During one visit, a now infamous photograph was taken of what appeared to be a young boy with glowing eyes, later identified by Missy as her imaginary friend Jody. Other investigators followed. Psychic Mary Pasquarella claimed to see a hooded, threatening figure she believed was tied directly to the DeFeo murders. In 1977, paranormal researcher Hans Holzer brought in a psychic who began speaking in a man's voice, claiming to be an indigenous chief, furious that his land had been occupied. At this point, the house was no longer just a crime scene. It had become a paranormal showcase. And that's when the story stopped being investigated and started being sold. In 1977, author Jay Anson published The Amityville Horror, which was based largely on interviews with the Lutz family. The book became an instant bestseller, and 2 years later, the 1979 film adaptation exploded into pop culture, cementing Amityville as a household name.
You will believe in the Amityville Horror.
Sequels followed quickly. Amityville 2: The Possession in 1982, and Amityville 3D in 1983, along with later remakes and countless low-budget films using the Amityville name, simply because it was legally usable. The haunting had become an industry, and once money entered the picture, control over the story became everything. And that is when the lawsuits began. In 1977, the Lutz family filed a lawsuit against Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s defense attorney, William Weber, as well as paranormal investigators and several media outlets. They alleged invasion of privacy, misuse of their names, and emotional distress. The case was ultimately dismissed in 1979. The legal battles didn't stop there. In 2005, George Lutz filed another lawsuit related to the remake of the Amityville Horror, alleging defamation over how the film portrayed him and disputes over promised compensation. By this point, the haunting had generated decades of lawsuits, counterclaims, and ownership disputes, all centered around who controlled one of the horror's most valuable stories. But the most damaging blow didn't come from a court ruling. That blow came from William Weber himself. Years later, Ronald DeFeo Jr.'s defense attorney publicly claimed the entire haunting was fabricated. He stated,
"We created this horror story over many bottles of wine,"
alleging it was designed to support DeFeo's insanity plea and secure a lucrative book deal. The family denied the accusation, saying that Weber turned on them after they refused his involvement. But the doubts didn't stop there. Weather records showed that there was no snow on the night of demonic hoof prints were supposedly found. Despite claims of extreme violence, police were never called. And perhaps the most damaging of all, the family who moved in after the Lutzes, the Cromartys, lived in the house for nearly a decade without reporting a single paranormal incident. No flies, no goo, and no floating wives. Nothing for years. That's where the story sat until one voice from inside the family broke the stalemate. So what's the truth? For years, the debate was stuck. But then a new voice emerged.
I believe that there is a such thing as evil, and I was a victim of that.
The oldest son, Daniel Lutz, in the 2012 documentary My Amityville Horror, Daniel insists the hauntings were absolutely real. He maintains that the paranormal events happened, but also he revealed a second darker story. He describes his stepfather, George, as a controlling, abusive man whose obsession with witchcraft could have opened a door to that darkness.
He lived with adults who believed in the occult.
This paints a different, more complicated picture where the true horror of Amityville might not have been a pig demon named Jody, but a flesh and blood person. So on the one hand, you have one of the most terrifying haunted house stories of all time. And on the other hand, you have a mountain of inconsistencies and confession that it was all made up. I'll give you my take at the end, but first, drop your theory. Head down to the comments and tell me, was this a real haunting or a really good lie? And if you want to keep diving into insane mysteries like this one, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. In the years that followed, the Lutzes divorced in the late 1980s, but to their dying days, Kathy in 2004 and George in 2006, they never changed their story and even passed the polygraph test in 1979. They made around $300,000 from the books and the movies, but allegedly spent most of it on lawsuits. Years later in London, a priest suggested an exorcism, believing that an entity was still attached,
Down Satan under our feet.
specifically to George. After the ritual, the couple seemed free. As for the house itself, it's still standing today, though subsequent owners have made renovations like replacing the iconic evil eye windows to deter tourists. The address was even officially changed from 112 Ocean Avenue to 108. The only thing the new owners seem to be bothered by isn't demons, but the constant stream of onlookers taking selfies on their lawn. Even with so much evidence pointing to a hoax, the Amityville horror legend refuses to die. Was it a lie? Was the house cleansed by investigators? Or did the entity leave with George only to be destroyed by an exorcism years later? Maybe, just maybe, the house is waiting silently for the next chosen target to enter. The only question left is whether it was paranormal, psychological, or something darker. The Amityville story refuses to stay buried. In our next video, join me so that we can dive in to the real story of the possession of Annalise Michelle. Thank you for joining me, and sweet nightmares. Bye.